Hello, everyone. Welcome to another informative episode on White Baby Gardening and Worm Farm. Today, we are going to be discussing raised beds, the types of raised beds, how you can choose one that is best for you, and how you can help to reduce the cost of filling it. Okay, give me a minute. Yeah, I got my pencil far away from me, and I may need to take notes. Okay, so we have a few questions that we are going to be discussing regarding your raised beds. Do you grow in raised bed or do you grow in the ground? Okay, hi gardening worm lady. You grow in the ground and in raised beds. Yes, I do that too. And I have. How are you? It's pretty cold outside. We have. You're great, good. We had a snowstorm started Saturday into yesterday, and it is supposed to continue on into today, but we haven't seen it starting to slow today. So hopefully we won't get any more snow. I can't go out through my side door because we have 2 feet of snow out there. You're off from work today. That's good. Oh, you're fortunate. It's a bit late for us though, but yeah, I think this is the worst snowstorm I've experienced in the last 10 years because we've had snowstorms before, but we've never had a situation where we cannot open our side door to get out. But that's just another part of life, I guess. At least we have another door we can go out through. You've lived through many blizzards. Well, I've only experienced a few, and thankfully, when they occur, is never at the time when I had to be on the road, so I'm happy for that. But I can't get to my worms. I look in front of my garage, and none of the doors can be opened. So today I'm supposed to be taking care of the worms, but I don't know how I'm going to get to them. Hi, Sian. So I'm going to have to go out as soon as I'm finished here. Hi, Michael Gardner. How are those chicken of yours? Yes, as I was saying, I'm going to have to go outside and shovel all that snow away from the garage so that I can get to my worms. Hi, Han White. If they have bedding and food, they'll be okay. Yes, and thankfully, I have been looking after them because I have two set of shelving for the worms. So the larger side I do on Thursdays, and then on Monday I do the smaller side. And for some reason, I just felt motivated to give them a little extra moisture than I would normally do last week. So I am not too worried that if I miss a day, that something will go wrong. Do you sell your worms? Yes, I do. Yeah, so I'm not worried that something will go wrong with them because I know the material that they're in is all food scrap. Not food scrap, but finished compost, which is what I use for the bedding and for their food. So I'm not worried about them with food and I'm not worried about them with the moisture because I had it a little extra last week. The good thing is that the bad thing with Saskatchewan is that the water tends to dry out quickly. We have a very dry, our air is dry, so the moisture tends to dry out quickly. So Sometimes you have to worry because even if you give them a lot, it can become dry very quickly. Uh, the fishermen are gardeners. Um, it depends on who wants the worms. If fishermen want it, I don't really know that we have fishermen here in Saskatchewan. Um, I don't know if they do it as profession. I know that there are people who raise fish as a profession, but to say fishermen who go out and fish as a profession, I don't know that we have any in our local. So most of the people who buy my worms are people who want it for composting purposes. Okay, so I was asking if you grow in raised beds or do you grow in the ground? I grow in raised beds and I grow in the ground as well. I started off planting in the ground and I've extended my garden and decided to do raised beds instead of just planting in the ground because I find that it has its benefits and I will be discussing that a little later. I grow in raised beds too, and next year I'm adding buckets. And White says she grows in container. Yes, okay, good. I also grow in buckets. I have a what is it called? Self-watering system that I set up. It was originally an hydroponic system, but then because of the freeze and thaw that we experience here, sometimes the soil keeps doing this and it caused problem with my hydroponic tank. So I had to dismantle everything and then I just switched over and make it into and made it into what is it called? Self-watering system. Yes, I like to plant melons in the ground, smaller things in raised bed. Yes, that is the idea that I have as well. And then when I can monitor where I put crops when they are in the raised beds. Nice to see you have therapy today. Have to get on the road, so glad. Okay. Take care, my microfarmer. Thank you for joining us. Have a safe day out there. Okay, so how do you choose the best raised bed for you? How do you go about choosing your raised bed? There are many factors that I use to choose raised beds. I think about how low do I want to bend. I think about, and White says she plant in the ground too. Depending on the height, some I have taller, some I have to, some I might have shorter. It's just what I had on hand. Okay, mainly my tomatoes. Okay, I'm right. Yeah, so I choose the height of my raised bed depending on what it is that I want to grow in that particular raised bed. So if I'm planting things like larger crop, then I will put those in low raised beds, maybe those 10 inches high. And then for smaller crops, I'll plant them in larger raised beds. My raised beds, the larger ones, they are 18 inches high because I don't like to bend my back a lot because my job, well, previous job, I had to do a lot of bending, and sometimes you bend in some compromising position that can put strain on the back. So I like to reduce any amount of strain on my back as possible. So my raised bed is 18 inches. Now, some of the factors that is going to determine what type of raised bed you get or how high your raised bed is going to be are things like your age. If you're up in age, then I would recommend that you get a higher raised bed rather than one that is going to have you bending down low. If you have knee injuries and stuff like that, then go for the higher raised beds. And these raised beds, you can build them where you can actually sit on the sides or the perimeter of the bed so that you can just sit and work. And it is a good idea to make your raised beds narrow rather than wide so that you can have easy access to all the plants in your raised bed. So I don't build my raised bed anything over 3 feet because then I can lean over and reach to my plants from both sides. Yes, so let's look at, we're discussing the what determines the type of raised bed that you get. So you may have to sit, you may have to stand, you may have to stoop in order to access your raised bed. If you are someone who doesn't have a problem with standing, but you have a problem with bending, then you can build your raised bed as high as you can make it. But you have to consider the fact that depending on how high your bed is, you may require a lot of material to make it or a lot of material to fill it. So to compensate for that, then what you can do is build it high, but build it on legs and with a base. That way it won't require extra material in order to fill it. Your raised bed also depending on the look that you're going for. So you have to think about, are you building your raised bed to be fashionable, or are you building it just so you can have something to plant in? You can build your raised beds thinking about what it is going to cost you to fill. So then if you don't have resources that you can use to fill your raised bed at a low cost, then you might want to build your raised bed low or build it on stand or legs so that you will use less material. Very smart tip. I build it on legs in order to save on material. Oh, good, good. Okay, so what is your favorite raised bed and why? Because I know there are lots of different types of raised beds. Apart from the height of your raised bed, there are tiered raised beds. If you look at, oh, I don't have that up yet. Yes, there are many different type of raised bed. There are those that you can buy from your home garden centers that are readily available that you can assemble by yourself. Sometimes you might build your own, and some come ready built. So, what type of raised beds do you prefer? Do you build your own or do you purchase raised beds? I make my own raised bed because I do construction and I always have extra material on hand. So I build my raised beds, and then sometimes if I'm out of material, well, it's not if I'm out of material, but most of my raised beds are made from pallets, used pallets. So I collect pallets whenever I can. I don't dismantle it to make the raised bed. I just simply cut it to the height that I want and join them together. Try to keep them uniform. So that is how I make most of my raised beds. My lower raised beds, I actually got them for free because my husband went to work and they were throwing out these materials. I don't know if it was originally designed for raised beds. I don't think so. But they had four sides and they had hinges, flexible hinges on all four sides so you can fold it up. So I just use those as raised beds as well. So that's what I use for my kids' garden. I have a rather tiny garden, so I haven't got raised beds. Okay, okay. Now, Some raised beds are made from wood, some are made from plastic, some are made from metal, and it doesn't, if you don't have access, if you don't want to spend money to buy wood to make a raised bed, or if you don't want to buy those pre-assembled raised beds, then what you can do also is get those barrels, those plastic drums, and just cut a portion of it off and put it on stand and use those for your raised beds. They might not allow you a lot of depth depending on how you cut it, because you can cut it in half, and then things like your vegetables, lettuce, and stuff like that you can grow in them. Or you can cut it where you cut off a third of it when you turn it sideways, fill that with your potting soil, and then you can plant whatever you want in it, because it is deep enough to facilitate larger plants like your peppers and your tomatoes. Okay, you didn't know that. Yeah. Okay. What do you use to fill your raised bed? Or even if you don't have raised bed but you have a container, what do you use to fill it? Yeah. Oh, can I buy a garden storage and turn it into a raised bed? I was thinking about doing that. Um, I don't know what your garden storage is, but I'm assuming it's that thing that okay, yes, I think I know what it is, because you showed one on that with your worms, right? Am I right? So if that is what I have in mind is what you call your garden storage, then yes, you can use that as a raised bed, as long as it is a container that is 10 inches deep and wide enough that you can plant stuff in it. You can use it as a raised bed. Okay, so you make your own soil. Yes, so do I. I don't like to buy things if I don't have to. Okay, yes, so yes, you can use it as a raised bed then. I fill the bed with leaves and from the full straw, and I do lasagna style. In the fall, the worms come and create soil. I also had my finished compost. Yes, that is how I fill my raised beds as well. Uh, I use quite a lot of things. So one of the questions here that I was going to discuss is how you can fill your raised bed cheaply. And so that point that you made there, garden lady, is one of the points that I'm going to be covering as well, because I also use leaves from the fall leaves, to fill the base of my garden, and I also do a lasagna style with it. I try to make sure that I have some amount of soil in it, because as you may know, there are some trace minerals that are found in the soil that you won't find in things like your compost and your casting. So I try to make sure that I have a bit of soil in my garden. The first raised bed that I did, the only thing I had in it was finished compost, nothing else, because I didn't have any soil to put in it, and I wanted to see if I could grow in just the finished compost. The things that I planted in the raised bed, they did pretty well. They were very luscious, but after a while they started looking as if maybe an animal was sleeping in the bed, and over time the plants started to droop. So I figured maybe uh, it needed a bit of soil and not just finished compost. So I added soil to the garden, to that raised bed the following year, and it turned out pretty well. I didn't have a lot of soil, but it turned out pretty well. Sorry, my spelling is terrible, and I'm texting while watching and cleaning. Okay. Yeah, sometimes you spell the things correctly too, and then the phone just decide to do whatever it wants and choose a word for you. But because you put in the right word, you're not paying attention to the fact that it has changed because you know you put in the right word. So, yep, that's just how it is. Sometimes I had bone meal or fish emulsion if I have those things. I try not to spend a lot of money because money is tight. Yes, that is a good idea. And I mentioned that some of my raised beds are 18 inches high. Now, there are very few plants that require 18 inches of depth in order to grow um, out of the vegetables that we plant. And so, what I do is in the bottom of those deep raised beds, I will put things like logs, wood chips, whatever, in the bottom of the raised bed, and that will help to occupy a lot of space, but it also has a benefit to it. And the benefit is that the logs hold moisture, and by holding that moisture, it will help you to reduce the amount of water that you actually use to water your plants. So I fill it with logs up to 6 to 8 inches, and then the rest of it I pour dried leaves, and then in between that is compost and worm casting and a bit of soil. Now, if you don't have your raised bed set up and you don't want to buy soil and you want to fill your raised bed cheaply, you can also just grade off the top soil in the area where you're going to put your raised bed. Just take a small amount of soil, level off that area, and then you can use that soil back in your raised bed along with your dried leaves and stuff like that. The thing I planted in my containers did better than the ones I planted in the ground. Do you know why? Um, I am not sure. Sometimes it could be the case where your soil doesn't have as much nutrients as the things that are in your container. It could be that because your soil in your container is looser than that in the ground, that can also have an effect. But really, I don't know exactly why, because I've had that situation as well this year where the things that are planted in the ground did not do as well as the things that were planted in my raised beds or in my containers. But I had the opposite experience last year, because last year the things that were planted in the ground did better than the things that were in the raised beds and containers. So really, I don't know what is the reason why that occur. All right, give me a minute. Yeah, so I don't know why that occur, but I would really like to find out. So if anyone knows the reason why sometimes the things in the ground do better or sometimes the things in the raised bed or container do better, then I would like to know. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, let's see. The things are okay. However, my tomato did extremely well in the ground. Okay. I think the nutrients in the ground makes a difference, plus the weather. Sometimes some things are better protected in the ground, and some things are better protected in the raised beds. Yes, that is a very good point. Yes, it is true, and especially like here in Saskatchewan where our weather is so bad, some things that would be able to survive over the winter, I find that if they are in raised beds or container, they don't survive. But if they are in the ground, then they tend to do better. So that is a pretty good point, garden lady. I might be planting in raised bed next spring. I will definitely use the tips you are giving us. Okay, it's good. Okay, let's see. What would you change about your raised bed if you could? What would I change about my raised beds? When uh, when I started my raised beds, I used, as I mentioned before, used pallets, and you know that the pallets have gaps between them. So you have a layer of board, then you have a space, then you have a layer of board, and then you have a space. And so to cover those space on the inside so that my soil does not come out, I use construction garbage bags, those really thick garbage bags, and I staple them onto the board. For the most part,